AC Butch here, and let's talk poker. Yeah, poker stories, the fun stuff. Let's go back to the early 1980s. I'm with my partner Paul. We have a paper bag distribution company on McDonald Avenue. The problem is, well, we hired a secretary, we built an office, but we didn't really like to work that much. We would go to a lot of lunches, have a few martinis, talk, shoot the shit, so on and so forth. And we actually would go into the track. And we were making some money at Aqueduct and then over at Belmont. And that was supporting the business and paying the salaries. But then we came up with the idea of some steady income. So we started a poker game on Friday nights. Oh, yeah. We had the Three Stooges come. That's three fantastic guys that were actually the uncles of my partner Paul. I mean, these are characters, to say the least, and they love to gamble. And we had a few other people. That one guy owned a seafood house. And there was Howie the Jew. Oh, yeah. I mean, this was a conniver, a swindler, a lowlife. I mean, Howie the Jew sold insurance to cab drivers and set them up with financing and totally ripped everybody off and cared about nobody himself. But he had a big ego and he thought he was great. He thought he was a great poker player. Meanwhile, he lost every night there, but still thought he was great. Okay, so when we first started, we actually would rent the apartment from our secretary on Friday nights, throw her $100, and we would also always go out and get some really fantastic food, mostly Italian food to serve during the night, and that was always a big hit. Everybody loved to take the breaks and eat the food, and by the end of the night, the game would go 8, 10, 12 hours, and we would usually end up cutting about anywhere from 800 to 1,200 from the game clear. That was after our expenses, so that was pretty good. But then we graduated. Gus. Gus was the owner of the seafood restaurant, actually on Nostrand Avenue, and that was next to Mikey Cash's place, the bagel place. Mikey was a great businessman. The problem is he wanted to gamble 24/7 while he was running his business. So no matter how much the bagel place made, it couldn't keep up with the amount he would be losing at OTB over on Avenue U. I mean, great stories with Mikey Cash. But Gus asked us if we wanted to invite a couple of these big shots that would go to his restaurant to eat. One was Borus, then there was Kosher, and there was this woman who supposedly had a boutique in Manhattan and sold jewelry. And then there was this older guy, I actually forget his name. Wow. What a shame. But anyway, he would come in with a cowboy hat, and supposedly he was from Texas, a big businessman. Well, they came in. P.S. To make a long story short, this was a crew of mechanics. Oh, yeah. Yes, this was a crew. They came in to take our game down. Borus was the main mechanic, one of the best in the country, also phenomenal with dice. This man had dice control. I mean, he could either cheat you by switching the dice, or he actually could control legitimate dice. I mean, this man was good, very good, one of the best around either way. And as a mechanic, let me tell you, you won't find a better card mechanic than Borus. They came in slow, and we used to move the game around a lot to different people. As a matter of fact, for a while we were running it in Mikey's Cash's house out in Canarsie, and we probably had about 3 or 4 different locations until finally in Brighton Beach in this beautiful private apartment house right on the water, right on the beach with a gate going into it. I mean, the whole bit. We rented an apartment on the ground floor, And Paul, of course, loved the beach, so he would live there a lot. And we would run the game every Friday night. And usually by the time the poker game was over, a craps game would start. And Boris and his crew, which of course we didn't know it was his crew, would take the game. Now, what it was, the woman and the older man, they were what they call catchers. In other words, the winning hands would be fed to them by Borus and occasionally by Kosher, who was learning the trade but becoming really good. Kosher was also a catcher, but a small catcher, and the other two innocent ones were the big catches. But in the meantime, it became so obvious that these fantastic hands were being dealt too often, where the other players would get sucked in. And one of these players was a wild, crazy man. I mean, he owned a deli on Avenue U, and big time guy from special services or a little out of control in the armed forces, whatever. As a matter of fact, one time he was held up on Avenue U in his place, and what did he do? When the people ran out and jumped in their car, he comes plunging out on Avenue with his gun. He commandeers the car right on Avenue. A woman is driving, waiting for a light. He gets in it and he tells her, he kind of almost just about forces her to chase this car down Avenue. I mean, this is what kind of a nut they're dealing with. And in the meantime, they ended up taking him completely. I mean, they busted him out. His business, they just financially ruined him. And this was even after we found out what happened. The end result was one night after I was trying to spot something for weeks, and they were so good, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't spot it. So finally in the crap game, not in the poker game, I kind of saw how Borus was throwing the dice, and they were legitimate, but they weren't touching each other. They were going against the foam pillar off the wall and rolling back perfectly, and this guy here could roll hard 8-7. I mean, the guy was a genius. But Borus also was a little bit of a sickie. He part of his shtick, but the guy must have been an alcoholic to begin with, so it wasn't so much of a shtick. He would sit there with a bottle of liquor on the table and actually make believe he's getting drunk, but actually he was. And he would be very arrogant and kind of say, "Here it comes." I mean, all kinds of crazy things he shouldn't have been saying. And the other people that were involved with him, and we found out later, very few people wanted to deal with Borus, work with him, because they were scared. Borus was, as great as he was a madman, and he was a genius also within his own right. I mean, he could write things in jingles and this and that, and the guy was actually a genius besides what he was able to do with the cards and the dice. So anyway, when I spotted this, I called Kosher on the side. I said, "Listen, we know what's going on between the card game, this, that, and the other thing," and we expected him to deny it, and he didn't. He came right on and he said, "Okay, you got us." So I said, "Well, that was easy." He goes, "Look, we've learned in the past, once the jig is up, it's up. And if we start telling you otherwise, that's where the trouble really starts. Let's sit down, let's talk." And him and Borus, for the next couple of hours, told us all about themselves. They demonstrated how good they were. How Borus could just pick up cold cards and deal aces and this and that and pot hands and change the cards. And if we were doing the deal, and no problem, because they would set up cooler decks in the bathroom, bring them out and just switch the deck. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff. And we told them we wanted to get X amount of money back that they cost, that they took out of it, and now we're going to end the game. And they kind of said, "Well, all the money we took out, it's lost at the track, but if you set us up, we'll give you a split of it." And we absolutely said no. We won't get involved in that, and we didn't. And a few times we saw them at the track after that, and again sat with them, enjoyed the stories, and they were gambling big. I actually saw them years later in Atlantic City. This shows how really great Borus is. The first time I saw them was at Bally's. I saw them like three or four of them together. They were back behind some slot machines, and they had these cups full of not coins but $500 chips. They had taken down a lot of money from the dice table. I don't know what it was. But then the second time I saw them was at the Taj. Now, at the time, I was booking bands there. We had one of my best bands of all, Just Us, performing in the Casbah Lounge, and I spot them. And I go walking over, hi, hello, this, that, the other thing, and I knew one way or another I'm getting on what they're doing. So it turns out that Borus, they would start, he would make a $400 bet on a hard eight. And they had a few side bets, but not a lot. So Borus doesn't do anything the easy way, because to him it wouldn't be a challenge then. I mean, a hard eight is not the easiest thing to make. It's 10-1 odds. Okay, I think he missed it the first time, but they still picked up money on side bets they were making, because this man here could have just rolled dice all night long and avoided hitting a 7 and kept picking up money. But again, no, this is too easy for Borus. That's one of the problems. He scared people. So the very next time out, he hits the hard eight. I had 100 on it. They had 400. It's 10-1 odds altogether. In other words, it's 9-1. So he gets back 4,000. I get back 1,000. They parlay. He parlays the $4,000. I didn't parlay the 100. I put a lousy 100 back on it again. I said, this man's nuts. I'm not parlaying 1,000. He hits it again. 40 grand. They pick it up and they just walk away with the 40,000. I picked up 2,000. The game was over. They walked out, whatever it might have been, and this is Borus, I tell you. And that was shooting with legitimate dice. I mean, he wasn't switching them at the table, which he's capable of doing. Nothing. But that was a crazy experience. He cost us a lot of money by breaking up our game. But it was an experience just being involved with true mechanics at that level. I mean, he was one of the best in the country, if not the world. AC Butch, over and out.